Everyone, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon on a somewhat cloudy, sunshine, typical Irish weather day, but just for a nice hour of fun and discussions around EV. So we have a nice packed agenda for you today. But before we get started, I would like you all to log on to the Menti as well, because this is going to be an interactive session. So if you haven't done so already, let me just see everybody in the meeting. I'm gonna send this. Everyone, okay. If you could log on to the Menti as well, because then we will be doing some interactivity with you. Don't worry, it's all anonymized, so we don't see your name when you start interacting with it, but we'd love to get your active input into this rather than just being a one-way street. So what are we going to be covering today? At first, what we would like to do is actually get started with Menti, because we would like to hear from you a bit more on how long you've been an EVer. We would like to get a bit of an assessment of what your experience with in the EV world is to date, because that's of course giving us a bit of an idea as the maturity of the audience, and I mean the EV maturity, not your age. And again, this is anonymized. So yeah, see already some great numbers coming up. So less than a year, some already between 1 and 2 years. We have a lot of seniority here too in the EV world. Hopefully they're already all members, as well as paid members. That would also be fantastic. That helps our cause. This is looking great. So I think we have a few more people in the call. We have now 17 who have responded. So we are 38 overall in the call, but I of course have as well some of our association members in here. So I guess that they will not be contributing to this, I hope. But of course they can if they want to. So we're now about 20. So I think there's a nice mix of experience. So that gives us a good opportunity to also refresh a little bit on the basics around EVs as we move forward. So feel free to keep adding this. I will be moving you on to the next slide. And this is just a question in relation to the association, if you are already a paid member or not. And of course, we would like to ask, to promote here that becoming a paid member has added value. So if you haven't yet, or if you're not yet a paid member, of course, this is also an opportunity to sign up to a membership. All right, so we have a nice divide, 13 so far in already a paid member and 11 that are not yet. 25 responses. Okay, fabulous. All right, so now we're also used to how to leverage Menti. And now we can move on. And I just realized I haven't introduced myself. I'm sorry. My name is Roland, and I'm part of the association committee. And I am currently your host for today. And of course, I'm here together with our committee members to give you a variety of introductions and experiences shared over the years, and hence the theme of today is about going the distance. And of course, it's a very applicable theme in the context of EVs. Because of course, a lot of times people ask you the question about range and really how far can you go with the car? Well, this is what we will find out today, as our members and our committee members will share with you their experience in going the distance. So we will now move on to an introduction by our chairman. And then we will go down to basics, and we will do then the going the distance with about the 1,000-kilometer challenge that one of our committee members recently did on EV Day. We will share a bit about Routeplanners and of course going abroad, what that actually entails. So now let's move on to having a little video of Simon sharing a bit of an update about our association.
Hi everyone, Simon Acton here. I'm chairman of the Irish EV Owners Association. Sorry I can't be with you today, but the guys thought I should give you a bit of a quick update in terms of what's happening from an IEVOA point of view, the state of play with EV adoption in Ireland, and just a flavour of some of the work that we've been doing since we last spoke to you at the AGM, and any plans that we've got coming up over the coming months. So just to start with, I think everyone can see that EV adoption is growing pretty quickly at the moment. The sales figures for August are pretty amazing. We're seeing a market share now of around 13% for pure electric vehicles, BEVs, about 10% for FEVs. So in August, there were about 1,400 cars registered with a plug, which is fantastic. And that means we've had something like 18,000 registrations in total year to date, including new and used imports as well, which is bringing the overall fleet size for cars with a plug to something like 46,000 vehicles. So things are really starting to gain traction now. We're seeing that sort of level of adoption grow, and hopefully that will continue. In terms of the work that we've been doing to support that growth, of course, we're continuing our engagements with the key stakeholders that we work with. So we have quarterly meetings with the Department of Transport and also SEAI. And in particular, we've been talking about the work they're doing around delivering additional grants. And also we're pushing and keeping pressure on the affordability of the EVs, and in particular used EVs in the aftermath of Brexit, and how that has affected the market in terms of imports and affordable imports, which is really important. In terms of SEAI specifically, we've consulted with them on the apartment charges grant, and that will see hopefully that will come to fruition soon, and we'll see something out in the next few months which will help fund or at least part fund charging infrastructure for people living in apartments, and that should be very, very warmly welcomed by us for sure. And also there will be an additional grant for destination charges, so this will be for other locations such as leisure facilities and so on to apply for charges, grants for charges on their premises, which is all going to help. We're also continuing our dialogue with charging infrastructure providers, in particular ESB e-cars. Some people may know the previous head of e-cars, Niall Hogan, moved on to a different position in ESB a few months ago, and I just got to meet his replacement, John Byrne, the other day. We had a good sort of introductory chat. Although he wasn't able to provide any specific details, he tells me and assures me that 2022 will be a big year in terms of what they will deliver in terms of hubs. And I obviously said we need some visibility of that pipeline. It would be great to know locations, and of course some of this stuff is commercially sensitive in terms of where these locations will be, so they weren't able to share anything in the meantime, but we'll keep pushing on that. Obviously this week, probably most of you know, we had World EV Day on Thursday the 9th, and I suppose that's a great way of raising the profile of EVs and EV adoption. And there were a few things just of note that we did specifically. I attended an event in Armagh in Northern Ireland for the Faster project. Now, this is a project which is a collaboration between the Irish border regions, so both Northern Ireland and Scotland as well, and they've secured EU funding to deliver 70 rapid chargers across those three regions. There'll probably be something like 20 in Scotland and 50 or so in Northern Ireland and Ireland border region. And that will be delivered over the next 2 or 3 years. So I was invited. It was great to be invited up there to speak on the panel discussion. And there is a link to the video if you didn't see the live stream. So maybe the guys can pop that in the chat or something if you're interested to see that. So that was a good event to be involved with, and we'll keep an eye on how that's progressing. Other things, as some of you probably know, we've been inviting corporate members to join IEVOA recently, and Kevin Dowling and Derek Riley in particular have been doing great work in terms of going out and meeting companies who are interested in becoming corporate sponsors of IEVOA. And we are happy to announce on World EV Day on Thursday that SAP are joining us as our first corporate member, which is great news. So there will be more to follow, and we're seeing a lot of interest, and it's really going to help us in terms of generating a bit more funding, which will help us run more events, and it will also help us operate hopefully in future in a more professional way, because we'll be able to help use some of that money to fund some of the work that people do, rather than us all being volunteers in future. And that's the idea moving forward, and how we'll use that money. So yeah, if you are interested in being a corporate member or mention it to the companies you work for, then that would be really great and help support us. In terms of what's coming up, the next week is Dublin Climate Action Week, and there are a series of events going on through the whole of next week. Of particular note, again, I've been invited to participate in a panel discussion about electric vehicles, and that will be next Friday, the 17th of September at 7 p.m. And hopefully the guys again can provide a link in terms of where you can register for any of those events. Also coming up over the next while, we've got the EV Summit in Dublin, Croke Park. I'm not sure if it's a physical event or not this year. Derek Riley, who is also on the committee, the IEVOA committee these days, is chairing the event. I'm not sure of my attendance yet, but hopefully we'll get in there and be able to take part as well. So that's on the 14th of October. We're also hoping to be able to return to physical meetings soon. Obviously, we've been quite cautious about doing that because of COVID. We'd like to do a physical event in October. Probably over the course of the next few months, we'll try and do the sort of 4 regional meetings that we talked about before. So for October, we're thinking we'll do a meeting in Leinster, and we'd like some suggestions as to where we could meet. So maybe you can contact us about that or drop some ideas in the chat. Also coming up, so at the end of October and through the early weeks of November, there is also COP26 in Glasgow, which is obviously a very important meeting of global leaders in relation to climate change and the climate crisis. I'm hoping to travel to Glasgow and take part with some of our colleagues in the EVA, other EVA groups in the UK and Northern Ireland. So yeah, I'll update as to what we're doing exactly. I might try and drag some people along, and I'm planning to drive from Dublin up through Northern Ireland and then across on the ferry to Scotland and take part there for a few days, which will be good to have a presence. So that's about all I've got. I've probably talked for long enough. I don't want to take up any more of the time. If you have any specific questions for me, then please do always feel free to email me, chair@irishevowners.ie. I'm always happy to answer questions offline that way. So thanks again for joining today. Big thanks to the guys for organising the event today, in particular Roland, Paul and Kevin, who have done a great job. And I hope you enjoy the event, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Take care. Bye.
Okay, so I saw already a question coming up for this. Thank you so much, Simon, for sharing that video with us. I know you're probably dialed in and en route to your destination. So thank you so much for giving that update. Just on the point of the corporate memberships, yes, if you contact our PRO at irishevowners.ie, you can get the information, but obviously you can also go to our website and you find some more information there. But Kevin or Derek are happy to help with any engagement together with any of the corporations you would like to represent. Just to give you a bit of an idea, right? We had asked Zap Map if they could share with us a bit of the state of the land of the different charge points. Unfortunately, they were not able to make it, but they did actually do specifically for our request a bit of a review on the current state of charge infrastructure in Ireland. They have on their website a full layout of how it all works for the UK, but they haven't done this yet for Ireland in the same manner. So this is what they shared with us. Overall, I think statistically speaking, we have over 1,700 charge points across the Isle of Ireland, and obviously Zap Map is not connected to every single one of them, but it just gives you an idea on how our charge point infrastructure looks like. Now, one thing that I'm really a bit bugged with how Zap Map is kind of categorizing the different categories. When they talk about fast, it's actually destination charges, anything from 7 to 22. Rapid and ultra rapid is actually where we're talking about normally what we would refer to as fast chargers. Just to give you an idea, and of course, when it's slow chargers, is anything below 7 kilowatts. So just to give you that point of reference. So in case you're looking at, hey, we've got over 700 fast chargers, where are they, right? Obviously, it's a reference of all the destination charges. So to give you a bit of an idea. Okay, so we are ready to move on to the next section, and this is back to basics. So since we have a bit of a mix of audience, we would just like to test with you on how well or how comfortable you are with some of the terminologies. So I'd like to ask you all to go back to Menti and help us answer some of these. How comfortable are you with these technologies? Are you wondering you have no idea about it, so you go all the way to the left, or if you say, look, I'm really comfortable with this, you don't need to tell me anything more about it, go to the right. So that's great. Already one person going, don't bother me about this, I know this stuff. Fantastic.
That was me, Roland. It probably doesn't count.
You should know. Okay. So Paul, I think we're starting to have some questions potentially, or sort of explanations that may help with some of these points, particularly around state of health and state of charge. Would you like to make some comments on that?
Yeah, cool. State of health, it's one of those TLAs you'll hear people throw around. It means, obviously, SOH means state of health, and it refers to where you're at on the cycle in the battery from, the day you got it to maybe sometime in the future it'll be recycled. Typically, I don't want to get too technical because you could go down a rabbit hole in this, but it's basically in the first year or so of any electric vehicle, you'll typically lose about 5% of your range, and from that point onwards, the degradation or the health will decrease very, very slightly over a fixed period of time. It can be aided by, always slow charging, using rapid charging or ultra fast as little as possible. In this day and age, it doesn't really make any difference for new owners. So, if you buy a brand new EV, it's probably not going to be your problem because you get a really good warranty, like you get 8 years, 200,000 kilometers or whatever it is. So you don't really have to worry about the state of health. On the Nissan Leaf, it's the bars, you get 12. I think there's lots of owners probably in the group that have Leafs with 8, 9, and 10 bars, so they've lost a couple over time. Most other vehicles, there's no mention of state of health anywhere. So it's something that's happening behind the scenes, and the BMS, the battery management system, is looking after it. So state of charge, then I'll just quickly cover that. That's an obvious one. It's basically the percentage of the charge of your battery. That's depends again on manufacturer a little bit. Some cars show percentage, some just show the distance you can travel. Another one that's semi-related to state of charge is the GOM, or the GESO meter, as we playfully call it, which is basically how far the car thinks you can go based on whatever algorithms the manufacturer decided. And most of them, as it's called a GOM, they're rubbish. They're not great in terms of predicting your state of charge. Degradation then is directly related to state of health. It's when dendrites form between the cathode and anode, and it's like little strings within the battery kind of go between the two, and eventually it becomes impossible for the battery to store and release energy. So that typically doesn't happen in car vehicles. The highest quality materials go into car batteries versus say your iPhone and stuff like that. So your battery should last for a long time. Regen, everyone kind of
car, right? More than likely will outlast the car.
Yeah, most likely the panels will start
Yes.
falling off the car.
Yes.
Your suspension will go. Your drivetrain will probably go long before the battery. Regen, everyone seems to know what that is. AC charging is at home. It's the slow and destination chargers, or the fast chargers, as Zap Map inconveniently called them. And DC is where you're plugging your CCS or your CHAdeMO in, or for those in the room, I saw Brian Dowling entering a few minutes ago, who has a Zoe. The older generations, it's actually AC fast charging, but for the newer ones, DC is direct current, and that goes from the charger straight to the battery. There's no inverter, there's no kind of step up, step down. It's just juice straight to your battery. The AC is slightly different. It goes through an inverter. It's converted into DC, and different manufacturers have different levels of efficiency on the chargers, ranging anything from 80% to maybe 95. And the slower you charge an AC, the less or the more efficient it is. Cool. Anyone, any questions?
I think we can. Any questions that come up in the chat, team? Let's just answer them as they go. Let's go to the next slide, which is a bit more on some of the basic terminologies. So what is a PHEV, what is a BEV, or hybrid? And the famous question we always get around driving electric cars, do you get any range anxiety? And what is this whole free charging from solar is all about? Shouldn't we pull this out from the grid? Or day-night rate, what does that actually mean in the context of where, basically your energy plan? So let's see how our audience is familiar with all these different terminologies.
We'll give them a minute.
Yeah.
But we appear to have some very well-informed folks on the call today.
Yes.
Yeah, Roland, if you asked about self-charging vehicles, you might have got a better response.
Oh, God.
I was thinking in the context of hybrids. Should I say that instead of self-charging vehicles, aka the Toyotas and of this world?
That's a good question, David. No and yes. So a PHEV is where it has a plug, and typically we describe a hybrid as something like a Prius without a plug. Now, to confuse matters, there is a Prius with a plug. But generally speaking, the hybrids that came out, say, early noughties, 2003, 2004, they didn't have a plug, and that's the difference. The P is plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. That's what PHEV stands for. And hybrid are typically these magical unicorn vehicles that Toyota and Lexus and a few other manufacturers have that self-charge. It's basically just regeneration been used to put energy into the battery. That's the difference.
Oh, I think now people want to know a bit more about range anxiety. So what is range anxiety?
Who has it? Who has range anxiety? I get bladder anxiety, Roland. I don't know about you.
Yeah. I know. This is so. Range anxiety is often the thing used, and it's very commonly used in the world of EVs, or particularly in the discussions around EVs. Not so much too much about by EV owners themselves, but more so people that are curious about EVs. Do you get any range anxiety? So that's usually where you see your gas-o-meter that Paul talked about earlier, going to a rather low level, and you wonder if you're going to meet your destination, or your car started to give you warnings. Some cars, for example, they already at 20 kilometers on the gun start to indicate that you have not enough range left, and everything starts to bling and bong in the car. And that's kind of where maybe some anxiety starts to kick in. But to be honest, I think a lot of people that have had reached that point probably realize they can still drive a bit and get home fine, and or reach the next charge point without too much of a problem. And as a result, range anxiety is often maybe the first time you start driving an EV, you may have that feeling if you're in a small range electric car. But if you see nowadays the newer brands that come out with the electric cars, they have a nice range, a decent range that you on a daily basis you more run into the bladder range anxiety than the actual electric car range anxiety. So, but that's basically what that terminology is all about. Free charging from solar basically means the recommendation is, if you have an electric car and you have a roof that has the ability to hold solar panels, you could benefit from charging your car from solar. And there are some people here in the community that have charge points that also feed in from the solar panels, like a Zap or an Anderson or an EO. The more the Pro version has that too. I think the Wallbox has also the capabilities, and the Rolex, there I think also some capabilities of getting the extra charge or excess charge from the solar panel. Instead of going into the grid, it then goes into your car. Might as well do that, and hence we refer to that as free charging from solar. And last is the day-night rate. We have, of course, nowadays as well smart metering in the houses, but day-night rate is then where you have the opportunity at nighttime, and it's usually from, in the winter, it's from 11 to 8 o'clock in the morning, and in the summer, it's from 12 to 9 in the morning, where you have a lower rate, energy rate that you pay for. And of course, that's the perfect time to charge your car. Of course, you have to assess whether that's of value, considering how often you charge your car during the week. If you do it on a daily basis, it's very well valuable. If you only do it once a week, maybe it's not as valuable, but you have to assess that yourself. And you can get this from your energy supplier. If you currently have a normal standard day system, you could get that also swapped out for a day-night rate system. And I think there's even some options, even with the smart meters, to have them configured in such a way, but I'm not an expert in that topic. But that's basically what day-night rate stands for. So we would like to hear from you a bit about what your experience is so far with electric cars. What do you like about electric cars? And this is just a free comment field, so feel free to start jotting that in, just to give us a bit of an idea of what you like about it. And you guess the next question will be, what do you dislike about it?
We have a few questions as well coming in on the chat, Roland.
Great.
This is Brian Dowling is saying he has charge point anxiety, and then Thomas is talking about his range anxiety, or is it charger anxiety? And then Michael Sherlock asked about mild hybrids. So range and charger anxiety is a thing, I suppose. You're heading to your charger, and will it work? That's the big question, and that can be frustrating. In terms of what mild hybrids are, they're a joke, really. Michael is probably the best explanation for them. A lot of the bigger vehicles, like say the Audi Q8, or not Q8, is it Q? Yeah, the bigger cars, they seem to have mild hybrid versions. And to be honest with you, I don't think there's much point in going into them. But just if anyone says they're driving a mild hybrid, they're driving a nice car. That's the too long didn't read version. Question there about solar panels. Like Adam, Pamela, it realistically could cost anything from about 3,500 up to 20,000, depending on what you're going for. So there's a Facebook group now. This isn't the plug. I just happen to be the co-founder of it, but there's an Irish hybrid inverter and solar panel Facebook group. Join that. There's a bunch of installers in it. And there's a whole load of users in it, and there's over 1,000 members. It's a good group to get into if you're even interested in solar. So that's a good one. Let me see, smart meter. Yeah, there's a few other comments there. So let a few people can read their comments. So we'll just move on to what do people like about driving an EV. That's cool, I have to say.
Nice, huh?
Yeah. Where were you for the last 5 meetings we ran?
Well, on the other side. Yeah, I think there's no disputing. I would experience all these points as well, right? The acceleration, the feeling that you can drive around and you feel that it's contributing to the environment, and no emissions. I actually was in Dingle a couple of weeks ago, and I was having my fish and chips out there at the harbor, and the one thing that bugged me was one of those big SUVs sitting there, running the airco and running the car at the same time, and of course standing still. When you kind of go, well, if you actually have an electric car, you can switch on the car, you can switch on the airco without anybody being bothered about it, because you don't get the emissions from it, and the noise, it's not there either, or at least it's very little noise that you get from it. So yeah, it will be a huge benefit when more and more cars on the roads are going to be EVs, certainly for those things. Let's see, what else do we have? The right quality, the comfort. Absolutely. You know, if you haven't driven an EV before, you notice. I mean, the one thing when I moved over to an EV, and that was 7 years ago, I moved from a Citroen C5 over to a Nissan Leaf, and the one concern we had was, particularly with French cars, they are, you know, generally kind of more geared towards comfort, and particularly the Citroens. How does that impact moving over to a Nissan Leaf? And to be honest, I actually found it an improvement over the Citroen C5, because you didn't have the roaring engine, you didn't have all the gears you have to deal with and everything. It was just such a nice, quiet drive. Yeah. I don't know, Paul, is there anything that you can add to this? What else we can mention? But I think the group here really said it all about how it is to drive an EV.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah, there's nothing there. Like convenience, I don't know if anyone's mentioned about the convenience, but like just being able to do for winter in particular, you know, setting your departure, having the car defrosted,
Yes.
having the cabin warm, that type of thing. That's just, I know there's some ICE cars that have had that feature, but every EV has it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And like Simon's note said, 18,000 EVs this year. That's bloody brilliant. Like, and
Yeah.
that's only so far. That's up to the end of August. So
Yeah.
you're more and more technology and everything, and it's really, really like they're just fun to drive. The little gizmos, and anyone who likes to fiddle with things, and I mean electronics and stuff, they're great for that. And they're quite customizable too, because none of this really super complex engine in the front that you have to work around. They're a lot easier to mod. Some of them are anyway, at least. So yeah.
All right, so let's move on to, what do you not like about driving EVs? Let's see if anyone have any comments around that, what you not like about EVs.
The price.
That's yes, yeah. The upfront cost, the total cost probably not so much, but the upfront cost, nothing. Charger availability, thank you. I think that's a very common thing. We need more chargers, and particularly if you think about the expectation by 2030 is that 40% of the entire, you know, in particularly in Europe, 40% of the amount of cars we will have on the roads will be electric. So in that context, we are nowhere near providing that 40% of the necessary infrastructure. And that's, of course, where we try to do a lot of lobbying around that, and of course, working with corporations and as well government bodies to really make that awareness, because, you know, we're not there yet. We definitely need to do a lot. Now, that said, where we were several years ago, it's no comparison, right? We have seen a massive improvement. But of course, it's not enough yet, and particularly through the country, especially if you want to do longer distance driving. Going to a forecourt and there's only one charge point versus 10 petrol points, you're gonna go, okay, if you want to get that 40%, there's got to be more charge point at that same location, particularly if you want to have the availability of it.
Yeah.
Oh,
like Norway has gotten there through,
yes.
You know, they had so many new EVs, and then the likes of Circle K started putting in dedicated charger forecourts and converting old ones.
Yeah.
You know, but it took to a point of 50% of new vehicles being electric before that happened, and we're at 13 and a half, 14%. So we've a bit of a ways away, and I understand people's frustration, but
Yeah.
you know, most of us charge at home, and you know, we
Yes.
have one charge en route. Like Thomas will give us a really clear view of what's possible today with today's vehicles. Now, obviously, he's driving the cream of the crop. It's a long range Model 3, but you know, at the end of the day, there's plenty of cars. Like I have a Kona EV that'll easily do 400 kilometers of decent, you know, mix of motorway and main roads. And I have a Tesla, and to be honest, the Korean car will go farther than the American car. Now that's because the American car is a big bloody boat, but you know, the smaller Teslas are definitely cracking cars for long road trips, for sure. See, is there anything else coming up there? I think that's fairly clear.
I'm just putting the link in for the survey that we still have open, and it is all about charging and seeing that there's so many, questions and remarks around charging points. We would love to get that information because we can use that, right? And actually, the original questions were coming from Energia, so this is, of course, really helpful to get that. We know about it and we do what we can, but of course, it's also an opportunity for you to lobby within the local councils, create the awareness with the communities, with your own companies. If you're employed at an employer, then work with them to see if they can start to fit charge points. There are many providers that do that. That will alleviate a lot of the challenges. I remember when I started 7 years ago, there was no charge point at the office, but I was actually the one person that started to elevate that. So now, and as you can imagine, I work for SAP. We have now charge points in both locations in Galway and Dublin. So as a result, we had more employees buying electric cars, and be able to charge at the office was, of course, a nice benefit. As well as a convenience to add to it. And in the meantime, we've upgraded the charge point to it as well, provide more smart capabilities with these charge points. So we can also interact with those that are charging and let them know that the car is full so that they can move it so that someone else can use them. So there's plenty of tools out there that can help in corporations, and we need more businesses to get on board as well as parking locations. Actually recently I was in Newwall in Naas, and at the local, the Starbucks, they now have EasyGo chargers, a fast charger as well as a destination charger. So you see them here popping up left, right, and center. Lidl does it. Aldi is now doing it. Tesco has the ESB chargers as well. So there is improvement, but again, there's of course more to be done, particularly when it comes to fast charging.
Yeah, more hubs required. Like Tesla have added one location this year, and that's the first one in over 1,200 days, so almost 3 years since they built the last supercharger. So they put 4 down in Cork, which is great. I've used it. It's a nice location too. Great spot to get a bite to eat and all that. And it was bang at the right location for us on route to our summer holiday. So it's great. In terms of one of the things that I won't say that I don't like the least, but that I find frustrating, commercial vans, they're shocking expensive compared to their ICE versions.
Plus the range is not really attractive.
Yes, they're terrible. Now I met a guy at a charger the other day in a Sayak van. I think it's called a Sayak Maxis. And he was saying that they say it'll get 240 kilometers range, but he's getting 270, which is the complete opposite of what everyone else gets. As in, if your manufacturer says you get 400 kilometers, you might get 350. But this guy was getting more. And he's a courier who had previously worked for Fastway, and now he works for a startup that just have electric vehicles. So I thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, I think there's a lot of room. Like Volkswagen have no commercial, and they're like one of the biggest supplier of commercial and fleet vehicles. So yeah.
Maybe the ID Buzz when that comes out, that would be nice.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I've been told that the Buzz is going to be their commercial, and I'm like, that's a joke. But anyway,
all right, so let's move on. We're a little bit behind our schedule at the moment, but let's move on to the next topic. So charging etiquette, and there's a lot of questions on this around Facebook. So we just thought to summarize here some of the points around that. So first, of course, when you're at the fast charger, the recommendation is, of course, as you get to 80%, is to move on and go to the next charger if you go further down on your route. The reality here is a lot of the cars have a charging curve that is quite high, up to about 80%. It starts to taper off, but after 80%, it really starts to drop dramatically down. So you're going to be sitting there for much longer to get the car to 100%, whereas you would be better off going to the next destination and there continue if it's an ongoing journey. But especially if you have cars waiting. If your course is there on your own and nobody is bothered by it, by all means, but if you are there and there's people waiting for you, it's the best practice to just move on after 80% charge. If it has a cable, it is a fast charger. So if you don't bring your own cable, it's not a fast charger. If you can plug it in from a cable from the device, it's a fast charger, and you will pay an overstay fee. I know there's been questions around the AC charge point on that same unit. On some of the units, they don't all have it. These AC chargers, they are slow chargers for the majority of cars, because depending on your onboard AC charger, it will only do at the maximum it can do, but you will be getting an overcharge fee because you are on a fast charger. For the Zoe, and I know Paul referred to it earlier, there are Zoes out there that can charge up to 43 kilowatt on an AC. But nowadays, a lot of the fast chargers has up to 22 kilowatt, and there's a lot of Zoes out there that can use the AC. So if you are driving a Nissan Leaf or any other model and you want to use the AC, use it for emergencies only, because you're going to get an overfee charge. As well, you will limit anybody else from actually using it that would be relying on the AC. So just to be aware. If it requires your own cable, it would not have an overstay fee. And these are typically known as the destination chargers, similar to your home, but those are so if you go to Tesco, Lidl, and so on, they all have their, own, I said you have to bring your own cable and plug it in. So those are the charge points that generally do not have overstay fees. Even the ESB ones do not have overstay fees on those. When you're at the charge point, particularly when you start to put your car there, it's not a car park, right? It's a charge point, so you should be charging. If you're just parking there because you think the privilege of driving an EV means that you can park there, that's not the case. The case is that when it's a charge point, it is there for driving, or I said for charging your car, not for parking your car. So if you're not charging, then move your car to any other normal car parking spot. You should leave it open for people that need to charge to be able to go there. Otherwise, you just limit it for other people. And of course, there's so many, and I know Paul and Simon mentioned it earlier, but the amount of new EVs we're getting onto the road, and it's really exponentially growing since early this year, and even last year, but I think even this year, it's even more so. We have already sold more and more cars than we did in 2020 altogether. We have a lot of new EVs on the road, and that's great. It's fantastic. That's what we need. But there's also a lot of experience on the roads as well. So it's also the ask to those that are experienced with EVs to help those that are maybe getting on board in EVing, understanding a bit of the etiquettes, but also simple things around charging, what the best charge points are, what cards to use, etc. It's just, help each other. That way we can really, ramp up the experience overall. Then let's see, going the distance. We are now going to move on to Tom, who will share with us a little bit about his experience from going the distance, staying on team during the EV day last Thursday for his 1,000 kilometers.
Thanks, Roland. Hi, my name's Thomas McGuire. Been driving battery-only electric vehicles for a little over 5.5 years now. And in that time, I've undertaken a number of 800 to 1,200 kilometer day trips. One of the reasons I've done some of them is to address something that I regularly hear from non-electric vehicle drivers, that electric vehicles aren't good for long journeys, or what about the range when the lights, heat and wipers are on. Over the past 2 World EV days, I committed to doing 1,000 kilometer or more day trips. Last year's was a 1,200 kilometer circuit of the island. So that was Wexford over to Killarney, up to Letterkenny, across to Belfast and back down to Wexford. This year it would be a bit different, as I was also attending the Faster project launch in Armagh too. So how did I do that and how did it go? I started with the basics. In my experience, the Model 3 is reliable, whatever the conditions or accessories, be it lights, AC or wipers that are in use for 400 kilometers on the motorway or 500 kilometers off the motorway. The Armagh City Hotel was only 285 kilometers away, and the event was starting in the morning and I didn't want to get home too late. So I figured that suggested 2 fast charges would be required. with probably 5 to 7 hours available before and after the event for going the distance. I just needed some options on how to do it. Google Maps on desktop has a great drag function. So I used that to create a short 450-kilometer route and several longer routes. You may have seen the day before I tweeted out for those long routes. I figured I'd decide on the day which of those, in which order I'd actually do it, depending on when I woke up, really. Given the 450 and 550-kilometer split I was aiming for, my familiarity with the car and motorway fast charging locations, I didn't use an electric vehicle journey planner, be it PlugShare, Zap Map, or a better route planner. What I did do, though, was check out Armagh itself, and I could see that there was 2 ESB e-cars charge points within a kilometre of the hotel. So it occurred to me that I could possibly do the day trip with just one fast charge if I could get onto either of those. As it turned out, I managed to wake up early and was on the road at 3 a.m. So I decided to take a long route first, going from Wexford to Cork to Dublin to Armagh. And at 4:50, I was on the M8 in Cork with 60% battery.
Thomas, can I make a comment there, if you don't mind?
Sure.
You're mad. That's all.
Yeah.
But he did it.
Fair play. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Where was it? Oh yeah, so I just got onto the M8 at the the Dunkettle interchange, so it's 60% left. I figured a high power charging hub options along the M7 heading towards Dublin were ESB in Junction 14 and Ionity in Kill. I ignored the M8 options as I figured I wouldn't have really driven far enough. The other 2 were over 350 kilometers from home. So I figured that would give me a lower battery. A lower battery means faster charging. And for technical reasons, Ionity would give me the fastest charging of the 2 locations, though it was also an additional 35 kilometers away from Junction 14. So I figured that if I was below 11% battery by exit 14, I was just going to stop at Junction 14 and charge there. As it happened, I wasn't. So I arrived in Ionity and Kill with about 5% left. Charged there for 15 minutes, which gave me just enough time to use the bathroom, go to the shop, and change clothes. So I left there at 7 o'clock. 15 minutes later, 7 o'clock. I charged up to 55% by then. And this would enable me to get to the Armagh City Hotel, as it was now only 160 kilometers away. And in the event I couldn't get to those ESB chargers, or they were in use, I'd be able to get to another faster high-power charger when I was leaving. So as I was arriving into Armagh, stuck at a traffic light, so I just had a quick look at the eCars Connect app, and that showed that both Linen Hall Street and Palestine chargers were available. So 553 kilometers done at that point. I plugged in at Palestine and headed off to the faster project launched. So 5 hours later, set off again at 2 o'clock. The car was charged up to 98% at that point. So 447 kilometers to go. Was pretty hopeful at that point that no additional charging be needed. I'd intended to follow the short 450 kilometer route at that point, as you can possibly see from the map there. So I left Armagh, went off to Ballygawley. From there on to Dungannon, with the intent of going up around Lough Neagh, through Belfast and onto home, which, as you can see, is not what happened. The Tesla navigation system does not support waypoints. So to save time for me entering multiple destinations and navigating to them, when I hit Dungannon, I thought I'll just navigate through Dungannon using the map view. It seemed like a good idea at the time, but 2 wrong turns later, I thought, yeah, I'm just gonna go south again through Armagh and figure out how to do the other 390 kilometers rather than keep making wrong turns. So at that point, it was getting later in the afternoon, so I figured, okay, people are going to start commuting home. I'm starting to get hungry again, so I thought I'd better get a chopped salad, so I'm going to head for junction 14. So I got off the motorway again near Dunleer, just taking the national roads from there to junction 14. So I got there at 6 o'clock, 50% battery left. Now I only had 184 kilometers to go. So well, I just went off to the shop to get food. Had a look on Google Maps, so I could see that if I took the M9 to Waterford, then go from there to Wexford, I'd do the 187 kilometers. So I was back on the road again at 6:10. 2 hours later, at home, 10% battery left, so I'd done the 1,002 kilometers, and I'd only spent 15 minutes at a fast charger. So that was what, €29 for a 1,000-kilometer trip. Not too bad. So what have I learned from doing trips like these? I think a good starting place is to, have a good idea what your car realistically can or cannot do. A better Routeplanners, PlugShare, Zap Map, and some others have journey planners. If you're not familiar with where you're going, or maybe you have unusual loads, or you're just not too familiar with your car, you can use them to see what options you have along the route. I think, especially on this trip, don't underestimate the usefulness of destination or standard charging points. Many long distance journeys will involve the car being idle for hours while you're off doing other things, as was the case with me. Check what charging options are in the vicinity, whether it's PlugShare, Zap Map, or Google Maps. And I'd suggest using the vendor's app if you want to check the actual real-time status or details on whatever fees may apply. Also be flexible. Charge points may be in use or unavailable when you get there. As I said, I had sufficient range. I figured, look, if they're not there, I can just use something else. As you can see, misdirections sometimes happen as well. And finally, I think just go for it. It's the only way to find out. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Thomas. That's a very brave initiative to take on, right? And particularly the amount of time it takes to do it. If you look sometimes at the videos that Björn is doing in Norway with this 1,000-kilometer challenge, I think we should start doing something similar, I guess, in Ireland, and you're already a great example of that. I just shared while you were talking the different apps, the different route planning apps, as well as what apps and cards you would need actually in Ireland itself. Predominantly it's ESB, EasyGo, Ionity, or in your case as well, Tesla superchargers. And there's also the possibility with Charge Map, which is generally more when you want to go abroad, but so that's a bit optional. But those three definitely for any other non-Tesla users, definitely as well to add to your list. Okay, so from here we move on to going abroad, because we are going the distance. Thomas showed us that we can do this in Ireland as well, 1,000 kilometers in a day. So Jan-Bart and Guillaume will be sharing with you going abroad. Now, we are a bit conscious of the time, so we did have a video from Jan-Bart to explain how it was back in the day, 2015, the challenges that he was facing going abroad, going from Ireland, from Cork all the way up to the Netherlands, through the north, and then go down, Scotland, and then go down to really get the experience and the challenges that he was facing with that. In general, I said it in summary from that video, and I'll post a link. You can take your time to go through it. He said, yeah, of course it was possible, but he didn't run into some problems. Some of the charge points did not have the app capability, so you needed an RFID card. Of course, if you didn't have one, then of course it was a bit of a challenge to get charged from them. And of course, in some cases, in some countries like Belgium, the number of charge points were a bit of a challenge. There weren't that many, and if there were any, they weren't necessarily fast charging able. So that was a bit of a challenge for him. But I will post a link so you can take in your own time a bit of an experience from that.
Hi everyone. So I've been asked to do a little bit of a video about my very first trip with an electric car abroad. Actually, whilst I was looking at sort of remembering the trip, I actually was astonished at how many problems I actually had during that trip. I've been abroad a good few times, and I haven't actually had a more troublesome trip than the very first one. So this was summer of 2015. I think it was May, June time. And I had my electric car, which was a 22 kilowatt hour Renault Zoe, for probably a little less than a year at that stage. I bought it in, what was it, October 2014, so I had it a little less than a year. And I always do a summer trip to my parents in Holland. We also have family in Farnborough in the UK, so that usually ends up also featuring. So my electric car needed to do that exact same trip, which it did, but not exactly easily. So the drive through Ireland was actually very much so trouble-free. It really was. I did my usual stops over to the to Dublin Port, got on the ferry, not a problem. Did a few charges in the UK using the electric highway. Had to get a separate RFID card for the electric highway. They didn't have their app. They were still free to use though, which was good. We then boarded the ferry in Hull, and I had about 35% left. And that's kind of where the trouble started. Now, Holland has one of the highest amounts of charge points per capita, if not the highest amount of charge points per capita. But in 2015, you kind of needed a RFID card to access them. You didn't have an app access. There was no contactless bank card or anything like that. So I had had gotten a new motion card not too long before that, and that didn't work, which by itself is a problem. But my biggest problem was I also didn't buy sat-nav maps. Being from Holland, I naively thought I knew where I was going. I sort of did, but I missed the exit. Once I missed the exit and I didn't really know how to get back or how to actually get to the charge point, I pulled over at the nearest motorway exit and bought the maps, looked online, and found that my backup charge point, the planning that I had done, the backup charge point was only a few kilometers away. I arrived there with 4 kilometers, 4% left, only a few kilometers showing, only to find that my RFID card did not work. Now, this was a new motion charger. The card that I was using was a new motion card, but apparently, because it was a card that was bought abroad, it hadn't been enabled for domestic charging. That's what I was told anyway. Now, highly inconvenient. They were able to actually start the charge remotely by phone, so that was okay. Got out of a jam there. The next charge point, however, also using new motion, they had checked the card in the meantime, also didn't work. So I got fed up at that stage and started using Fastnet. Now, Fastnet, as some of you might know, is a company that has charging hubs around sort of a good few countries now. Back then they were just in Holland, and they had 35 stations around the country. Now, they had app access, so you could literally just sign up on an app, local Wi-Fi, local network, just no problem, start to charge and you're done. So I used them to get to my parents, which thankfully meant I got there without any further issues. The next leg of the journey was to Ostend in Belgium. Now, Holland, I just followed Fastnet again, because that was the most trouble-free access. In the meantime, my new motion RFID card was fixed and did work. I did use a few of those chargers as well. But Belgium had very few fast chargers, even worse than Ireland ever had. So driving from we entered the country around Antwerp, to have to drive across Belgium in a very limited range car was fairly difficult, and I had to make use of 2 chargers. Like, one charge point was at a shopping center, which was a 22 kilowatt charger, and you needed to go to the customer service and get yourself an RFID card, which I did, but it was only useful for that charger. I still have it. It was only useful for that charger, so it was a bit pointless for me to get it. But anyway, that charger worked. The next one was at the IKEA in Ghent. That was just a plug and play charger, but I needed to use it because there was no other chargers around. Ostend had a few chargers around the place, but they were all AC chargers. There was no real DC chargers around, and the DC chargers that were around back then only had CHAdeMO. There was no CCS. There was no fast AC. There was no sort of well, at least that area of Belgium had no fast AC chargers. So I was kind of just stuck using AC, but it did work, no problem at all. The next part of the actual journey was my favorite. My wife's is absolutely probably still mad at me for it. The weather completely changed at the end of our stay in Ostend, and there was a gale force 8 headwind going to Dover. Now, as it so happened, it was also the longest leg of the bit that I had planned, due to, again, no real fast chargers along the route. It was 100 kilometers. Now, I could have used an AC charger in France, but I didn't have the RFID card for it, so I have no way of accessing it. So I didn't even attempt to get it. Even back then, I think you couldn't get one of those RFID cards if you didn't have a French address. It's a bit pointless for Ireland. That's thankfully now different. So I charged at the last charger I could find in Belgium, drove on to Dunkirk with a force 8 headwind. My range disappeared like crazy, and I ended up being in the UK and needed to make use of my backup plan. My backup plan kind of also didn't work. So my backup plan was to use a Renault dealer, which turned out not to be a Renault dealer. It was a Nissan dealer, which only had a CHAdeMO DC charger. The next Renault dealer in the town that had a broken charger. I used a public charger in the town centre, and that was also broken. My new motion cart was meant to work on that, didn't work on that. They had a start by phone option, which I tried to use, couldn't use, and so that didn't work. The other charger nearby, according to my sat nav, I couldn't find. I was driving around this, it looked like a sort of a government building for about 5 minutes. Couldn't find it. No idea where it was. Tried a third charger I tried another charger. No, actually there was a charger in the middle. There was a charger in the middle at a hotel, which turned out to be a charger that needed another RFID card, which they didn't have at the actual hotel reception, and I also didn't have. You had to order it by post. I obviously didn't get that done, so that didn't work. The last charger I tried was at a local sports ground, and finally I was able to charge, but I had to use the remote phone-in service. If that didn't work, I would have been completely stuck. The rest of the journey through the UK was all done using the Ecotricity Electric Highway, which was pretty much trouble-free. I couldn't use any of the sort of local AC points. There weren't too many of those, and I needed RFID cards. I didn't use them, so I just stuck with the Electric Highway. And I had planned my stays to be pretty close to services, so there was a service station near the family in the UK. There was a service station near the hotel in Weston-super-Mare where we were staying, and it worked pretty well. Now, the way back, at the time, I'm not entirely sure if that has improved in the meantime. I drove back through South Wales and we took the Pembroke to Rosslare ferry. Now, South Wales has one motorway going through it. That was pretty well serviced with Ecotricity sites. The last one before the ferry was about a 50-kilometer trip off the top of my head. There was no chargers in between, so if that charger had been broken or anything like that, I would have been stuck, but thankfully that worked. charged up enough. I drove really slow through Wales, knowing that there was not going to be any chargers. So I think I set my car in eco mode or limited it to like 80-85 kilometers an hour. So I was driving really economical to make it to the ferry, and I had enough to get to Wexford. There was no AC fast chargers or CCS from Rosslare until you actually got to either Gorey going to Dublin or Waterford going the other direction. So I had to again make use of 22 kilowatt AC chargers, and I got back home. So yeah, it was a long journey with a lot of small niggly issues, and the biggest thing was there were so many different charging networks that they all needed separate RFID cards. I think I ended up over the years with about nearly 10-12 RFID cards for the other trips that I've done, and it just becomes really cumbersome. Now, with regards to planning the route, I use things like PlugShare and Charge Map. They were just about starting, and they weren't as extensive as they are these days. And a service like A Better Routeplanners didn't even exist. And, you know, so I had to do all of my things by hand, and sort of I had an Excel sheet with like all the points and work out exactly how far it was between the charge points, and make sure you had backups. I usually try to have at least 2 backup plans. It was an adventure. I personally enjoyed it. My wife a little bit less so, but personally I enjoyed it. So I think I've waffled on for long enough. Thanks for watching, and do enjoy the rest of this webinar, and we'll talk to you guys.
I'd like to hand it over to Guillaume to share with us where we are at right now, and how things have been ever since Guillaume repatriated back to France, and still, as part of the association, shares his experience and latest updates on electric cars that are coming hopefully our way in the near future. Guillaume, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk today about my international trips a bit, and how to succeed into doing an international trip. First, I've been driving EVs for over 7 years, and I've had 5 different EVs, from the 24 kilowatt hour lift to Model 3 Standard Range Plus at the moment. So I've had a few different experiences. I've driven abroad with all of those. And just to give you a little story, my very first trip was actually in 2014. When I got the car, I bought my first Leaf 24 kilowatt hours in Oxford, in Nissan dealership in Oxford. It was 1 year old. And it was quite difficult. It required a lot of planning. And the dealer, actually the salesman, told me, I quote, "You are brave," which means that he was probably not trusting too much his product. But it's important, I think, to do this, because you're just showing someone that, you know, it's possible to do it anyway. The first thing to know when you want to do a long distance trip first is which EV do you have, because obviously you have to consider fast charging. And really, we have 3 different categories there. We have Teslas and CCS vehicles, and also CHAdeMO vehicles, which are the Nissan Leafs that we all know. With Teslas, it's obviously super easy. So if you have a Tesla, you almost don't need to listen to me today. You just put your destination in the machine, and it will lead you wherever you want in Europe. It's very easy. However, I'm not talking about Jan's Tesla. The second is CCS cars. So any car with CCS plug-in sockets. So those are more and more common in terms of fast chargers. They're a bit everywhere. And this is the standard of tomorrow, so it's going to get easier if you have one of these. As for CHAdeMO, is a bit more challenging. The network of CHAdeMO vehicles, CHAdeMO chargers, is not going to extend much more from today, and in the future it's probably going to decrease. However, we know that some companies are working into doing some sort of adapters, so it's to CCS, so it might not be the end of the game for CHAdeMO vehicles for long distance trips. But of course, when you look at your EV, a very important thing to look at as well is the charging speed of the vehicle. So which is they would advertise 100, 150, 200, whatever kilowatt of charging speed. So it is important to know that it's actually a peak very often. So it's interesting to see how long it takes to go from 20 to 80%, for example, and it gives you a good idea. This is quite important when you do those long distance trips, because if you stay for an hour or two at each top up, you're not going to do a lot of kilometers in your day. The next thing is, of course, planning your route. So we talked already about a better planner. There is Charge Map as well, and you could use the car infotainment if you have a Tesla. The others is a bit more tricky, but a better route planner is great, especially if you don't want to bother too much. You just put your destination. It will tell you, depending on your car, your filters. You can really personalize your this route, and so it's quite handy. If you like to do it a bit more yourself, if you're a bit more adventurous, I really recommend Charge Map. So Charge Map is great because it goes all over Europe, and you can use filters. And then for each charge point that interests you on the map, you can have more details. You can see what's the cost, maybe the different RFID cars that will work on this charge point. And you have comments from the community, because it's a community-driven app that will tell you if this charger is rather reliable or not, or rather busy or not. So this gives you a good feel for, should I go use this one on my route or not? Anyway, whatever you do, you always need to plan your route, even a bit with a Tesla, and you need to have a backup plan. So don't forget, don't charge it when you have 10% left, and have a plan B just in case that charger that you're counting on is not working. So really have a look at Charge Map. I really like this. The next thing is a charging card. So again, we mentioned that a bit earlier. There's a few like Charge Map Pass, Shell Recharge, which is the same as NewMotion, and Plug Surfing. So those are apps or providers that do not require monthly payments. So you might have to pay for RFID upfront or nothing, depending on the network. And then those actually, they are not their own providers. They just work on different networks. They have roaming agreements with plenty, like hundreds of network providers. And when you go abroad, you cannot subscribe to each ESB, eCars, or EasyGo that this country or that country has. So you really need some or a few of those guys. If you have those three systems, you probably cover 90% of all charges in Europe. So those are good to have, and it will be quite useful for sure. What I can say about trips, it's generally okay. I never run out of electricity myself. I've driven for many years, and if you have a backup plan, it's going to be okay. Don't be scared. If you really need to do a very long distance trip, you can do like Thomas, get a Tesla. I actually I went from Geneva to Budapest in July, and it was over 1,300 kilometers. I did that in a single day, and it was super easy to do. I didn't have to plan. I just used the Zap Map of the Tesla. So you can really do very long distances, which is just as you wouldn't do much longer distances in a nice on a similar day, or you'll get very tired, because the limiting factor is a human at this stage, not the car. The car can do much more than what we can as humans. So it's really possible now in most of continental Europe. If you're going there, there is very few places which do not have any fast charger. Of course, if you get into Eastern Europe, it starts to be a bit more patchy, but usually it is okay. A word about ferries. You're thinking, oh yeah, can I charge in a ferry? Irish Ferries offers this service, so you have to look it up, and you need to book it. Actually, if you're going to France from Dublin, so you have a Dublin Cherbourg with Irish Ferries, you have to book it, but you might not need it. It's a free service, so that's nice. But every of the Irish ports have a fast charger nearby. So there's one in Dublin port. There is a couple very close to Rosslare port, and there's in Cork is a bit further, maybe 15 minutes drive from Ringaskiddy. So this is quite easy. To be honest, it's safer to get a fast charge. You don't count on the ferry charger necessarily. On the French side, unfortunately, when you're in Cherbourg, it's a bit of a annoying place. The network is still a bit patchy there, just as you arrive in Cherbourg if you're going there. So I would recommend rather arriving to Roscoff if you ferry to mainland Europe. Roscoff is in Brittany, so it might not suit if you're going east. But if you're going south, it might be a better choice because you have many more fast charging options when you're driving south from Roscoff. In general, also, of course, allow plenty of spare time. You never know what can happen. Maybe your backup plan is a slower charger, or maybe you will have to queue. During my trip back from Budapest, I went through Austria and Germany, and it was the weekend between July and August, and this is the busiest weekends on European roads. Everybody's going on holiday or going back from holidays, and this is extremely busy. And I had to queue at a few Tesla supercharging stations, even though there are many supercharging stations in there, many more than in Ireland. That's what I wanted to say. If you're more or less, if you're interested in this, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you haven't looked at it, I have documented some of those road trips. So it's a bit long, it's a bit detailed. You have to you have to agree to listen to me for quite a long time. But I kind of detail all those trips that I've done, not all of them, but many of them. So if you're interested in how it actually practically works, I recommend you to tune in the YouTube channel. There's also a lot of other content, but we have covered anyway also long distance trips abroad. Back to you, Roland. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Guillaume. I think that's a great insight into traveling abroad, because I know that will become more of a thing as people get into electric cars. I know of some friends that want to already plan to go to the Netherlands next year or go to France with their electric car. So of course these questions come up. I even had my boss recently asking me a question on what will be involved if I go to the UK, things like that. So a very relevant topic, and it's great, of course, that our ferries can use or can be used as well to charge up. It probably will not be a fast charger, right? It will be over the duration of the ferry trip. You will be able to charge up your car to whatever it may be possible. I don't think they're really that fast in charging. But it's a great opportunity for those that want to venture out, take the car with you and go abroad. Plenty of options, and Jan-Bart will also refer to that in his videos. The Netherlands is another place where it's pretty much like the Macam, as you see with Norway, with regards to charging infrastructure. So there's so many opportunities to charge anywhere you want. With that, I will stop sharing my screen. I know we're a little bit over time as we had scheduled, but of course we are here all together. If there's any particular questions, we are here on the chat too. But of course, if you want to, you can also, unmute your line and ask us any questions.
Feel free to ask. We don't bite. Any question will go.
Yep. Actually, in preparation, I did have some people submitting questions on our PRO mailbox. So one of the questions was raised around why do manufacturers recommend to charge only up to 80%? Why can't we use the 100%? Paul, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. It's an interesting topic, because realistically, the main reason they say to charge to 80 is so that they don't have to pay out in warranty claims. And I know that's a little cynical, but the reality of it is that's it. They don't want your battery to get degraded and they have to fork out money to replace it. The other side of that is I think it used to be a thing. It isn't anymore, really. Like take Tesla's standard range Model 3, standard range plus, that comes with a lithium iron phosphate, or you'll hear it called an LFP battery. You can charge up to 100% every day, and Tesla recommend it. The main issues are the degradation on the high nickel batteries. That seems to be the bigger issue. So the longer range cars have high nickel batteries, and they will degrade that bit faster than those lithium iron phosphates. I know that the likes of Nissan are still recommending 80%, but I think it's a legacy thinking. I think they didn't know enough about how the batteries would fare over a number of years. We're about 11, 12 years into having EVs on the road. I think the first Leafs came out in 2010, 2011. So, they know a lot more now. And I think as time goes on, you can just use the battery as much as you want. It is just a recommendation after all. And there can be exceptions. The main thing to take away is if you're charging to 100% and it's not an LFP battery, try and do it timed so that it when it gets to 100%, it corresponds with you taking the car and driving away. That will reduce any kind of issues. The biggest issue is when the battery's full, and there's a chemical reaction at that point, and that's when those dendrites that I mentioned earlier can form. So like most cars these days have charge timers. So if you're leaving at 8 a.m. every day, charge to 100% and just leave bang on 8 a.m. Even 15, 20 minutes, half an hour is fine. So that's just why the why is nuanced, but the reality is charge to 100% if you need to charge to 100%.
Yeah, and just don't leave it standing there for too long, right? I mean, if you go to the airport and you're planning to go on holidays for 2 weeks and you think, oh, I need to make sure I have a charge when I come back. Let's make sure I charge up my car to 100% before I park it at the airport car park. That's not a great recommendation to have. I mean, in those cases, if you have it up to 80% or just over 80%, that's fine for that duration. But if you want to leave it up to 100% so that you're sure you get your charge when you come back, it could. It wouldn't be a good practice to do for an electric car. Same as in the current, particularly last year with the COVID situations, there was a lot of questions around what should I do with my car because I'm not driving it as much. And this is also where the advice is then leave it between 20 and 80% from a charging perspective. Don't charge it up to 100% and don't let it go down below 20% because if the 12 volt full battery will keep kicking in to try to stay current. Otherwise, if you have not enough traction battery left, then of course, you're basically having issue the moment you want to use your car because you can't go anywhere because it won't work anymore.
Just to add to that a little, when I had the 30 kilowatt Leaf, I was commuting up and down to Waterford every day, which was 100 and something kilometers. So for basically the 3.5 years for 5 days a week, I was just charging that up to about 100%. And it's still showing a 12 out of 12 battery capacity, so I wouldn't worry too much if, like Paul said, I was leaving within an hour of the car hitting 100.
Yeah. So in short,
I think it's all taken.
Is not right. It's you can charge it up to 100%, use it as you want to. Otherwise, why would you have spent that extra on an extra range car and then you're being told you can only use 80% of it? Use what you need to use. Just be smart with how you use it, and when you want to charge it up to 100%, just make sure that you do it right. That's it. But there's no I said that issues nowadays with the current cars to really say if you plan to go in the next 5 hours or even in the next 24 hours, it's fine if you have your car at 100%. It's just for longer periods of time, it's probably not as good.
Yeah, Kieran raised the point there about aren't there buffers to prevent issues? There are, but the buffers are small. Some cars have a top buffer, some cars have a bottom buffer, some have a top and a bottom buffer. So at this point, my recommendation is just drive it however you want, charge it however you want. The manufacturer isn't going to allow you to damage the battery, and reality is, that's a money thing for them, and I think you can just use them as you see fit. It's just a recommendation. So if you need 100% every day, just charge 100%.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a question from Paul there on our house charger uses about 55 to 60 kilowatt hours to get 50 kilowatt hours into the battery. Is that normal? Are some home chargers more efficient? If so, which ones?
That's a great question. The simple answer is it's your car, not the charger. The charger is literally putting out AC 32 amp single phase, and it's the onboard inverter that's converting from AC to DC to store in the battery. All power electronics in electric cars were not made equal. So the simple answer is there's nothing you can do except changing your car to change how that is. Save one point which I made earlier, and that is if you change charging rate, the lower the amperage, the more efficient typically those inverters are. So I would suggest whoever, sorry, was it Paul? Was it? Yeah, Paul. If you're able to record that data, try a full charge or the 50-60 kilowatts at 3 kilowatts, as in 16 amps, and see how much of a difference that makes. It could be significant enough. I know very similarly myself, I have Teslafy connected to my my Model X, and I can see when I'm charging in the office at 3-phase 17 kilowatts, the efficiency is 85%, so it's pretty bad. But at home on 7 kilowatts, it's about 92 or 3%. So, you know, your mileage will vary.
Yeah. I have another question here. Why are public chargers designed in such a way that it can only be accessed from one side? Unlike what you would see with petrol and diesel pumps. I recently experienced this on a journey where I had a CHAdeMO car, but the points were actually occupied by a CCS charging as well as an AC charging, but the CHAdeMO was free. But I could not charge because of the way the charge point is set up. Who would be interested in answering that one?
No comment.
Well,
I think like I said earlier about Norway, things didn't happen in that regard in Norway until they reached like 50% of new vehicles, you know, being electric, and that's when the magic started to happen. Where you got petrol pumps, you can use both sides and all that. Most chargers today seem to be, say, if junction 14. In theory, you could park behind the chargers in junction 14 if they'd laid them out in such a way, but for the most part, they're up against the walls and things like that. And I think the manufacturers are trying to keep the charge ports as far forward or as far back on the vehicle to make it, you know, forward facing. And as Jan-Bart has just said, Fastnet in the Netherlands are doing those beautiful, really I think they're the most wonderful looking charging locations, apart from GridServe. GridServe are up there in the UK as well, but I think they look wonderful. And again, you can use them on both sides. So I think it's just a matter of time. With only 14% penetration with a plug and realistically 7.5% with battery electric, we've a bit of a ways to go for the economics to work out, but I think that'll come.
Roland, can I come in here, Eamon?
Absolutely, Eamon. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to say the original fast chargers installed by e-cars were all FSEC early models, and those particular devices can only have one fast charger at a time. But the new Siemens and FSEC chargers can charge on both sides. So you see that in junction 14, you see it in Portlaoise, also on the M9 at Kilcullen. So that's changing. Okay, it's a historical thing. Currently, most stock has the old FSEC chargers, so you can only have one fast charger, but that is changing. Yeah,
I see the comment here as well from Kieran. Indeed, some of the older charge points, you can only use either CCS or CHAdeMO at the same time at one time. The newer ones you can do both, but of course, if the space is not there, the way they're set up, then of course you still can't access them, even though you could charge on them. I think that was kind of the point from the original question, but it is still the case that there's a lot of charge points out there, fast charge units that have CCS and CHAdeMO, as well as the AC fast charge. The AC you could use in parallel to the two DC ones, but you can't have CHAdeMO and CCS at the same time on the older chargers. So just to keep that in mind, even though there might be a free plug, doesn't necessarily mean you can actually do the charge as well, depending on the model of the charge point itself. If you see, you have the other units as well from EasyGo, for example, they have them on both sides. I believe you can use them in parallel, but some of the old FSEC ones you can't. So good. Hey, I see Jan-Bart is there. I thought you had to work, Jan-Bart. Sorry we didn't play your video in the end because we were a bit tight on time, but we did share the link. So in case people are interested in Jan-Bart's experience back in 2015 of driving across to the Netherlands. So, yeah, I know you talk too much. Any other questions?
Awkward silence.
A lot of silence. Now, obviously,
it's Francis here. Sorry, first time.
Hey,
just
Francis.
to say on some of those that sort of contention, the charging contention I see in social media that often you might be able to charge side by side on a fast charger, but the charge rate might drop depending on the available electricity and the charge point itself. So although the panacea is that a fast charger might be able to charge 2 cars at the same time, that may be true, but it might not charge at the rate you expect to get as if there was 1 car there. So just bear that in mind if anyone's in a hurry or is excited about charging 2 cars at once. Yeah,
no, you're absolutely right. And as well, even if the overstay fee still applies, even though the charge current is lower. It's about the time. It's not about the amount of kilowatts you're pulling. So indeed, if you're plugging into a fast charger, someone's already plugged in, and you see the charge rate drop, your 45 minutes still counts on, particularly on the e-cars ones. So that's also something to keep in mind. Thank you, Francis. Let me see. Solid state batteries. No, we have not talked about it yet. There's a lot of news going out about solid state batteries. When they're coming out, that's of course a big question. I think it's just, I think if you look now in the social medias and the news channels, you see a lot of new innovations around battery technology, faster capability of charging, etc. And you always have to add a couple of years to that before it even gets into the mainstream manufacturing processes, because of course it has to be properly tested. The cars need to be designed to be able to cope with it, etc., etc. So while we are now dealing with the current technologies, they of course are already a few years old if you compare that to what's potentially coming. So yes, there's a lot going on. But it doesn't mean that from 2022 we all of a sudden have cars with solid state batteries, even though someone like Toyota might make the claim that they potentially could. But then they also claim that they can self-charge. So big question. So yeah, to Paul's point, 2035, 40-ish, yes, to prove it all out. Okay, so with that, I think we can wrap it up. I know we're a bit over time, but that's okay. We were all here together. So thank you so much for joining. Obviously, we are the Irish EV Owners Association. Of course, you're on our Facebook channel. If not, please join us on the Facebook channel and sign up to our YouTube channel. And share with us some of your experiences and thoughts, and of course also questions and things you would like us to get involved with. But of course, don't forget, we are also looking for memberships and contribution to our membership. So if you are not yet a member, or not even yet a paid member, please feel free to go to our our website, irishevowners.ie. And sign up to become a member, and hopefully also become a paid member, so that you can also help us to get into the actions that we're currently doing, as we have shared throughout this call. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and thank you for all the speakers here today from our own Irish EV Association, and looking forward to connect with you on social media, on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, whatever. Looking forward to connect to you next time. Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.